It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. This is your feel-good breakfast show. It's Expresso. Now time for us to focus our attention on our health segment. And measuring your pulse is a quick and simple health indicator that you can check for yourself, but that's if you know what you're looking for. So today we're going to step into the world of health with our resident doc, Dr. Darren Green, who's here in studio to teach us what to keep in mind when measuring our pulse. I tried measuring Leanne's and I'm like, I can't find it.
And she was like, you're dead. I was like, no, I want to be alive. How are you, Dr. Darren Green?
Fabulous,
Good
thanks.
to see you. Okay, so I know it's going to be an obvious question, but
Okay.
just for those of us who need context, what exactly is a pulse and how exactly is the processes of it being a pulse set up?
Yeah, so it's a sign that you're alive, firstly. Let's start there.
That
It's
is a good sign.
It's a sign that the mechanisms and the pump that's responsible, which is your heart, of getting blood to the vital organs of your body. That includes your brain, your heart, your kidneys, your gut, the muscles, etc. You need all that to survive and to make the most of your life. So if you don't have oxygen and nutrients being delivered to those areas, you die. Or they die, really, the organs first, and then you will surmise. But so what the pulse actually represents is what happens in the heart.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got chambers of the heart called the atrium and the ventricles, and they move in a beautiful synchronized way when the heart contracts and relaxes.
Yeah.
And that's like blood pressure, systolic, diastolic. And what the pulse represents, it's an extension of that pressure wave as the heart contracts in the blood vessel system. So when you actually feel the pulse, for example, what you're actually feeling is that absolutely translated pressure wave coming from the heart contracting and relaxing.
Okay, well, maybe I've been watching too many medical dramas and Grey's Anatomy, but when measuring your pulse, you were referring to your wrist, and I know they often go here in the neck.
Carotids, yeah.
Where do you measure for your pulse?
Yeah, so you can measure it peripherally. If your blood pressure has a systolic of 90 or more, you will feel the peripheral pulse, or what's called the radial pulse.
Yeah.
And that obviously is the thumb side, and it's at the level of the wrist, and you take your 2 or 3 fingers like that, and you depress the area to feel, obviously, whether the blood vessel itself, the arterial blood vessel carrying oxygen-rich blood, presses against the fingertips.
Yeah.
And that's where you'd feel there. And
Yeah.
you can check, obviously, centrally, which is closer to the heart. Those are more strong. Those are the carotid pulses, for example. And you can check in the groin as well.
What are some of the main factors that you've got to take into account when looking for a pulse?
Yes, so we look at a few things. We look at the volume load. We look at the rhythm of the pulse.
Yeah.
The volume tells you what the blood volume in the system is. It tells you what the pressure, the blood pressure is. And then the rhythm is actually very important. It tells you whether the heart is beautifully moving in synchrony. In other words, whether it's timed perfectly and the periods are the same every time of relaxing and contracting, which is important because you get what's called deadly rhythms, where the heart becomes irregular and leads to further complications health-wise. So the pulse character, volume, the rhythm, all that's very important. It tells us about other disease processes.
Okay. Well, I was feeling my pulse right now. It felt pretty strong, but how do you know how healthy your pulse is? Is it a weak pulse? And of course, what does all of this indicate? We're talking about heart health and your pulse this morning. A little bit more after this with Dr. Darren Green.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
We're here with our health professional and expert, Dr. Darren Green, in the house. We're talking about heart health and understanding your pulse. Now, a little bit earlier on, we spoke about the rate of the pulse.
Yes.
But also now, I want to talk about the strength of the pulse. What if your pulse is weak? What does that indicate about your current health status?
So if you've got the heart and all the pipes connected to it, it's a closed system. So what that actually means is that the pressure in the system might be low. In other words, if you're not feeling it in the peripheral areas that we spoke about, like the radial pulse, means that the pressure generated within this closed system might be low as well.
Okay.
Often when you're in shock or when you've had a heart attack and the pump is actually broken, or there's an issue, obviously, with septic shock, then that happens. Your peripheral pulses obviously become fast, but also the volume goes down.
How do you know if you have a weak pulse? Because, I mean, if you're measuring your own pulse, how would you know it's weak or not?
Yeah, so firstly, if you struggle to actually feel it, then you'll know. Because normally it's something that's bounding and quite easy, and if you know where to feel, and also how much to depress the vessel before you get a response, that's quite important. And then test it in a bigger artery as well and correlate, you know, in the neck, for example, and then compare the two. That helps.
I've experienced heart palpitations before.
I'm sure you have.
Usually when you take a young supplement that
A young Supplement.
Yeah,
Right.
that helps with the metabolism. And then heart's going. When should you be
Yes.
concerned when it comes to heart palpitations?
So normal pulse rate is between 60 and 100 for an average adult. Children often have higher pulse rates, by the way. It's not because they're in a heart failure or dying.
Yeah.
Just remember that. Your pulse rate as an adult between 60 and 100. We call it tachycardia if it's above 100, obviously, and if it's below 50, we call it bradycardia, too slow.
Okay.
So you should worry if your heart resting pulse rate is above 100.
Okay. Well, doctor, you know, earlier we were talking about a weak pulse. We've now spoken about heart palpitations.
Yes.
Is it possible for you to have too strong of a pulse? Is that the same?
Yeah, some people's bound and they can feel it right here in the temporal area sometimes when you're sleeping at night.
Yes.
Or your thumbs and your fingertips
Stressed
start
Eric.
throbbing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Remember
so
stressed Eric?
yeah, you can actually feel, and that's often due to people that have hypertension often have that, and then hyperdynamic circulation. Sometimes even with really strong athletes, you'll find they've got really, really strong bounding pulses.
Yeah.
It could signify valvular disease as well in the system, in other words, heart valve disease, if it's pathological. But generally, it's a sign of the pressure reaching really high levels in that time.
What can you do in that moment? Because, I know I'm differentiating here now between a strong heartbeat and your pulse, but it's, you sometimes by breathing, you can calm your heart rate, but what do you
Definitely.
do when your pulse is really, really strong, like you said, bounding?
Yes, so I mean, so the heart, the rate of control of the pulse, you've got special nerve tissue in the heart in the sinus, that's called the sinus node. And you've got a sinus node and an AV node, and the one speeds up the heart and the one slows down the heart rate, and that's a nerve supply to the actual muscle. It communicates to the heart chambers and the muscle itself saying slow down or pick up. Obviously, you see someone take their shirt off, your heart rate goes up. It's an emotional response, and the nerve supply is also busy involved with that. The same happens, obviously, with different receptors that are stimulated with caffeine and energy drinks that you mentioned as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we're going to talk about our pulse a little bit more after this, and exercise, and of course how those two come together in a beautiful love relationship. All that and more coming up on your Feel Good Breakfast Show. Dr. Green is in the house. If you have a question or comment, please do give us a call, 021 430 9881.
It's my Feel Good Breakfast Show.
Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show. It's Expresso. We have Dr. Darren Green with us in studio as we continue to talk and understand our pulse. Now, Dr. Darren Green, earlier, Leanne was talking about exercising and,
Yes.
with your heart rate. When it comes to your pulse and monitoring it, how do you know this is a good figure, this is mine? Because, they often say do a workout using
Yes.
60% heart rate.
Good question. Great. So you work out your maximal heart rate by saying 220 minus your age.
Okay.
And obviously, if you're a lady, you work it out by saying, say, 200 minus your age. That's your maximal heart rate. And
That's 100%.
Yes, that's 100%. So if you're 40 and you take 220 minus for that's 180. So if they say train in the zone, that's safe for you to get fitter, but not put your heart under too much stress. Like 80% of your maximal heart rate, it'll be 80% of 180, which is 150 something, I think.
And that's how you can monitor it.
And that's how you can, so you train in zones. People that use, obviously, the heart rate monitors when they're running, training, cycling, they obviously set the alarms to go off. When the pulse rate goes to 180 or 160, they know how to push on the bike or in the pool or even running. So it's wonderful to understand that tells you how much strain is exerted on the heart. Remember, obviously, you can complicate things by what you're ingesting in terms of medication, in terms of stimulants, tea, coffee, etc. as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you are exercising, how long should you wait before your heart rate or your pulse returns to normal?
Yeah, so normally the fitter you are, the
Yeah.
quicker it returns to normal,
Yeah.
and that's one of the tests standardized with a lot of the medical aids fitness assessments, by the way. And that process, within 10 minutes, you should be back to your normal pulse rate. People that do ultra-endurance events still have a bit of an elevated heart rate for up to 2 hours afterwards, which is quite interesting. Remember, the resting morning pulse is quite indicative of your fitness level as well. So for an athlete that's a seasoned athlete that normally has a pulse rate of 49 or 45 in the morning, having a resting pulse of 80 is high for him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should one be taking these supplements, though? Those that
Energy
increase
boosters or increase
your... Yeah.
So the issue is the supplements give people energy, and they use the supplements often for energy. I'm speaking about stimulants.
Of course.
Speaking about things that contain taurine, guarana, caffeine, all these things. And the issue is that they have the ability to accelerate your heart rate, besides doing the exercise, the dancing, the trance raving, whatever you're doing. and then it puts you at risk of developing an abnormal heart rhythm that actually could be harmful to you. And that's what people need to understand.
Absolutely. Well, we did get a call a little bit earlier on,
All right.
and the person wanted to remain anonymous, but he asked, why is it that his heart rate increases every time he sees Zoe?
On the TV.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people
So
that see Zoe and their heart rate just like goes through the roof.
Thanks for helping South Africa get fit, guys. Thank you. But yeah, so there is an emotional response, obviously, from the brain that increases the nerve supply to that atrium that says hello. And then that obviously increases blood supply and oxygen delivery everywhere.
It's a real thing.
It's
well,
a real
how can
thing.
you calm
Real
the
thing.
heart rate down?
Close your eyes, don't look.
I can't look at you. Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Darren Green, for being here and, of course, helping
Good
us
to see you.
understand more about the pulse and how it works. It's always very
Exciting.
interesting and very enlightening, being able to talk about these things.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you for having us, and we'll see you again next week.
Yes, and to that guy, now you understand why your heart rate increases when you see Zoe Brown. It happens. It's okay.